for having me. Particularly, I want to thank Jonathan and Lisa for having me especially. Honestly, the real expertise is sitting with all of you. I wish there was a technology or an app that allowed us to quickly surface the insight and learning you're sitting on, but maybe at the 10th annual Global Summit we'll figure that out, because the wisdom really is with you. So my opportunity today is to talk about what I call the new global, and ways in which we might bridge creativity, which is a word I don't think we use enough. When we talk about entrepreneurship, I think something more foundational is this notion of creativity. How do we bring and bridge creativity from west to east and east to west? One of the things that I think I was thinking about as I was framing my talk in the last couple of weeks was that, for all the difference in all of our different countries, in all of our different genres, what if I talked about something really, really different, which is, what do we have in common across from Swaziland to Kosovo, from New York City to New Zealand? If you are a creative or a creator, or yes, an entrepreneur in any one of these markets, what do we share in these contexts? And my view, I've spent a lot of my career in a lot of different contexts. In fact, I last saw Lisa here 6 or 7 jobs ago, it seems, in the US. I think to be a creator, whether it's in Detroit, the city on the left, or Mumbai, the city on the right, I think you actually share more than you realize. But really, the real answer to this notion of bridging creativity is GEC, right? I mean, if you were sitting around thinking about, geez, wouldn't it be great if there were a way to bring together the global community in a shared context, online and offline, to share learnings and not leave to chance the idea that a really great idea from Africa makes it to Asia and vice versa? I think GEC really is the answer. So the question is, what am I doing here? What should I talk about if the idea is to speak with even more specificity about what it is we share as entrepreneurs from West and East, from the global North and from the global South? What other insights might we talk about that maybe we all share? So what I'm going to do is just share 5 insights with you. That's it. I'm going to share 5 insights with you from my own career and otherwise that I hope help you all, whether you're an early stage entrepreneur, whether you're a policymaker, whether you're an investor, think a little bit differently about you and your own leadership in your community. So I spent a lot of my career at Twitter. I spent the last nearly 5 years at Twitter helping set up Twitter in Asia and then over time in the Middle East and North Africa. And so my insight number 1 is about thinking horizontally. Thinking horizontally. I think as entrepreneurs, as leaders, as creators, we're often taught to think vertically. What I mean by vertically is we're taught to think about headcount. We're taught to think about offices. We're taught to think about investment in markets and investments in opportunities. We're not taught to think about hustle. We're not taught to think about a market that might be tough, throwing a scout in that market to go figure the market out for a second. We're not taught to think about advisory boards and a network of advisors. One of the things I'm proudest of while we were at Twitter was that we entered so many markets around this part of the world, not with proper investment, not with your traditional forms of top-down investment, but through a network approach that relied on partnerships, scouts, advisors. We converted our consumers to become our marketers on behalf of us, and in a really leveraged way, led in markets. We tracked cups of coffee we were having per market as opposed to any other indicator as a metric of success. In fact, I think, the CRM of the future won't just be about managing your relationship with sales clients, but it'll be about managing your relationship with your networks, with people. I think all of us as entrepreneurs, as leaders, as creators, as business people, aren't just sitting on sales channels and accounts to manage, but we're sitting on consumers, volunteers, networks, an informal sector that we might rely on to lead and enter markets and imagine opportunities. One of the things that I do now is I run a business called Times Global that helps the world's best ideas. We invest in the world's best ideas that want to come to India. And I'll talk about it in a second, but my generation, the generation of millennials, the internet was our passport growing up. And I think that all of you from nearly more than 170 countries are sitting on real market expertise in your countries that other entrepreneurs, that other businesses might rely on as they think about what, again, we call horizontal market entry, into networked entry into your respective markets. All right, that's insight number one, thinking horizontally and not vertically about how you invest and how you grow. Anybody know who this guy is? Just scream, raise your hand. Awkward silence. All right, so this is a guy named George Hagel. He's the founder, we're an entrepreneurship land, I guess. He originated the term zeitgeist. Has anyone heard of the word zeitgeist? All right. So zeitgeist, it's a German phrase that refers to this notion of the spirit of the times. Every place, every country, every community, yes, every room has its own zeitgeist. The topic of conversation, public consciousness. My view as entrepreneurs and creators is that we severely underestimate the role of zeitgeist, the role of culture, the role of media in how our products scale and grow in countries. We diminish the role of what it means to see yourself as a media company. So my challenge to all of you as you think about growing your companies is to not just think clinically about growth and inputs and spreadsheets and PowerPoints, but to think really hard about how you become topical in the local coffee shop, how you become topical with protagonists and influencers in your country, and many of you do. If you were to add the word productions to the end of your company's name, think of the name of the company you work for and add the word productions. All of a sudden you're a media company. How would you reimagine the stories you would tell? One of my biggest regrets as an entrepreneur, and I've been an entrepreneur a few different times in my career, nothing wildly successful at all, but one of my biggest regrets is that I didn't do enough to tell stories. I didn't see myself as a storyteller, and these days, every company is a media company. Every one of us is a media company. Every one of us has an opportunity to shape and become a part of zeitgeist. Obviously, at Twitter, we saw our jobs as taking what in many countries was a foreign brand and bringing it to the center of zeitgeist in countries. Because if you're not in the center of culture, if you're not a center of storytelling, you haven't really arrived. And so insight number two for all of you, I think, is to think about the role of zeitgeist, whether it's macro or micro, in the context of your growth and scale. All right, insight number three. Does anyone recognize this building? All right, this is a government building from here in Johannesburg in the 1880s. I forget the name of the street, Rishi Street or something. It is, I think now, the post office building. Insight number three is that thinking of government in 3D. Many of us ostensibly work on public problems, right? The ethos of the day, if you're really a mission-driven entrepreneur, is you're solving a problem that someone else isn't solving. In particular, maybe government has a role to solve these problems. My challenge to all of you, and many of you think in this way naturally, is to think of government as a three-dimensional solution or opportunity. My good friend Arvind will be speaking a little bit later about this, I know. But government isn't just an institution to fend off when they're coming at you. They aren't just a sales channel when you need it. They aren't just a blessing from a policy standpoint when you crave it. They're all of the above and more. I think government can play an extraordinary role in helping drive product experimentation, product scale, and indeed product credibility. And it's something that I've tried a lot in my career, including at Twitter and in my current role as an investor, and particularly in parts of the world like this, and certainly the further east you go, where the role of the state remains rather, in zeitgeist and other contexts, remains rather palpable. A related point is the enterprise, right? A lot of us want to see ourselves as the founders of the latest big consumer hit, all right? And it takes some humility to pivot from the consumer to the enterprise and see yourself as maybe not the new demigod of the next billion user app, but an owner and a leader in a space that aims at perhaps a more finite list of accounts, and that's okay. So that's insight number 3, thinking three-dimensionally about government and the enterprise. Insight number 4, this is of course a little drawing of the window in Robben Island where Nelson Mandela was. You know, one of the things we all think about when we think about where we want to invest, we think about monetization when we're always analyzing potential customers and users, and we certainly did that at Twitter. We think about the value of a user. But the reality is that our markets are all dynamic and they're all changing. And I think one of the things sometimes we miss as entrepreneurs is this idea that even if your customer segment today in South Africa may not be as monetizable, let's say the Android user in South Africa may not be as monetizable as the iPhone user in America, that doesn't mean you don't invest in South Africa today, because you have a window of opportunity to make that first impression in a market like this or in any kind of market. So one of the lessons I've learned, in many cases the hard way, is to think of markets not as static, but windows as opening and closing all the time. And I think the companies and entrepreneurs that do well are those that, you know, of course look at data on customer potential, but ultimately exert their own judgment on the opportunity a market presents and the extent to which a market window might be closing. That's insight number 4. All right, last insight, then I'm wrapping up. So a buddy of mine at Stanford, or a buddy of mine who went to Stanford, I didn't go to Stanford, just released this book. It's called Fuzzy Techie. Has anyone heard these terms before, especially together? So apparently, if you go to Stanford, and you're one of these folks that studies the liberal arts, and like me, I majored in history where I went to school, you're called a fuzzy, right? So if you're studying the humanities and music and English and policy, you're a fuzzy. But if you're an engineer and studying the sciences, you're a techie. It's an interesting kind of culture. And so he's written a book just out where he's talked about how one of the most underappreciated skill sets in technology, in digital, in entrepreneurship, is the confluence of the two. And in particular, the importance of paying attention to the fuzzy skill sets. Especially at a leadership level, I think we don't spend enough time talking about the right side of our brain, about the importance of the arts and the humanities, and the ability to think really creatively and interdisciplinarily about problems. So my challenge to all of you, informed by whatever set of experience I'm sitting on, is, you know, some of the best hires I've ever made in my career, some of the best ideas I've ever had, some of the best ideas I've ever watched other folks have, haven't come necessarily from the coder or the engineer, but have come from folks trained in learning, who've learned how to learn. And one of the things I'd encourage all of us, whether you're hiring a leader for your business in a new market, whether you're a policymaker thinking about how to fuel entrepreneurial culture, I would reframe that project as not about hiring someone skilled in business or someone skilled in technology, but someone skilled in creativity, someone skilled in creation, someone skilled in a passion for learning. And I think if we do that as a community, we'll find that we don't just have leaders, but we have real evangelists who have an opportunity to see around the corner and make sales that we didn't know we had to make a year ago. So to wrap up, you know, one of the things that's exciting about my current gig is that I bring all these insights together in one business. I run a business called Times Global, we take the world's best ideas and we bring them to a market I'm passionate about, India. We're the leading investors of Uber, Airbnb, Coursera, Vice, and many other global businesses as they seek to win India. But our thesis for winning the market isn't about cash or spreadsheets. It's about thinking holistically about the market and provide our entire portfolio these kinds of insights and skills as they seek to win the market. So with that, I hope this was a helpful set of insights, and I'm confident that all of you will be and are already the gateways in your respective markets. Thanks again.